We agree with their principles, but their tactics could bring down the House. Will the Freedom Caucus vacate yet another speaker? Is the House falling? All this and more coming up on this edition of The Grid.
The Grid, a digital frontier of freedom. It's our platform where we talk about faith, politics, and commerce, where we analyze current events from biblical and common sense perspectives. I'm so glad you knocked. The door is open, and we have answered. Come on in and welcome to The Grid. Hey, Shaun, welcome to this episode of The Grid.
Hey, Chris, good to see you as always.
And likewise. And good to see, well, we don't actually see. Good to have all of our audience members here today, our friends, family, patriots, freedom-loving individuals alike. We thank you for being here as well as we cover a pretty important topic today, which really centers around a house divided.
We'll be back right after this.
Midwest Glass & Mirror is a full-service glass and mirror company. Located in Stevensville, Michigan, this company serves both residential and commercial customers in Southwest Michigan and Indiana. In business for over 30 years, they are the glass and mirror industry leader and are trusted by homeowners, property managers, and commercial clients. Their mission is to exceed your expectations by delivering top-notch professionalism, integrity, and craftsmanship. I know one of the partners personally, and I can assure you he is a man of faith, a patriot, and loves God and country. He's a great example of American small business success due to hard work and an expert craft. Call 269-428-4464 or visit MidwestGlass.com today and ask how they can help you. Again, that's MidwestGlass.com or call 269-428-4464. Be sure to mention that you're a Kingdom Patriot. All right, Shaun, let's dive right in. So you and I, you gave me a call today on the way home from work, and we just had a brief chat about this. We both got a little stoked up and fired up about it, and it centered around this news story. Now, the news story I originally read was on Fox News, but it's kind of everywhere. And the title of the news story is this. It said, GOP rebels plunged the House into the chaos amid mutiny over government shutdown deal. That was an article on Fox News, but you can go to Newsmax. You can pretty much go anywhere, and you hear various descriptions given to what's going on, such as GOP rebels, hardliners, and it all centers around the fact that Mike Johnson, the recent Speaker of the House, has been trying to work across the aisle to get something done just so we can avoid a government shutdown. And there are some folks in the House Freedom Caucus who are not happy with that. Shaun, when I mentioned this to you, you had I shouldn't say an audio emotional reaction. What say you?
I most certainly did. I love the Freedom Caucus. As you and I talked, we both agreed that we agree with them about 99% of the time. And I like what you said, that you don't agree with their tactics all the time. This is one of those cases where I'm ready to take them to the woodshed. It is time for some unity, and you need to get with Mike Johnson because he is the man with the plan. I really do. We both feel like that the Lord pulled this all off, and suddenly here's a Joseph. Like, Joseph who? Where did he come from? And now he's the Speaker of the House. We need to stick with him, even if we can't get everything that we want, because it doesn't work that way.
No, it really doesn't, Shaun. And this, man, I tell you, this absolutely gets me fired up. Because I think the words I use with you is when it comes to the Freedom Caucus, I absolutely agree in principle. I do not agree with the tactics. And I think that the tactics, so when you think of principle, I think of the vision of an organization. This is the direction we're headed, right? But it's never a straight line. It's just not, especially if you're having to make fundamental change to your organization, because you have to come up with the tactics how you're going to get there, and those tactics are never a straight line. And so what's happened is the tactics that the House Freedom Caucus has used, or at least the ones who continue to oppose pretty much every Republican leader, is that it is a complete departure from reality. We will hold line to these, and we will get these things that we want, because come or hell or high water, and we're okay with the party and the principles going down the drain on behalf or subservient to the tactics themselves. And I get just totally fired up at that because it's like, do you realize that the Republicans don't control the Senate? Maybe they haven't checked in with Mitch McConnell lately and realized that he's actually the minority leader, not the majority leader in the Senate. Has the House Freedom Caucus actually figured out who's in the White House? Now, none of us know who's actually running the White House. That's a different story. But it's clear that the Democrats control the executive branch. And so when you take this approach and say, we're going to get what we want, period, end of story, I don't know what you're smoking. I really don't. But it's something stronger than vape. That's for sure.
Agreed. That's why, honestly, I want to call each one of them and say, look, you've got to get with this guy. You're not going to get everything that you want. You've got to be strategic, and you can't be threatening to yank the speaker out of the House every 6 weeks. You honestly need to be taken to the woodshed, and I'm ready to just tell him, hey, look, I'm going to ask the Lord to take you to the woodshed. And trust me, when he takes a political figure to the woodshed, it's public.
Yeah, no kidding. And so I wonder, I mean, I guess we're not going to go through all the details, but ultimately this all centers around because Mike Johnson is working with Democrats to try to avoid a government shutdown. Now, we can argue all day long if a government shutdown is a good thing or a bad thing. What I know is that we have a unique opportunity in 2024. I think we're going to take more House seats unless we do something boneheaded like this. I think we got a good shot at taking the Senate. And if Biden's running, we will take the White House. Let's just say that clearly, unless we do something completely stupid. And so then I see that this guy is, I'm looking right here, Bob Good. He's the chairman of the Freedom Caucus. You know how long he's been in office, Shaun? Or I should say, how long he's been in this this leadership role? Yep, you got it, 9 days. And so I'm like, what are you doing, dude? You trying to make a name for yourself? I'm really not sure. Are you trying to pull the Matt Gaetz approach? Because this to me rings of that approach of we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We're going to do a little bit of scorched earth here. We're going to, in fact, this procedural vote is really what brought this to light, that it failed. Apparently, in either house, in any Democrat or Republican controlled house since 2002, one of these procedural votes has never failed. So, I mean, again, this is a little bit historic, at least for the last 20 some odd years. And as you spoke to it, Shaun, it really brings about disunity. Now, I will tell you, I am right with you. I believe that Mike Johnson has been put in this position by the Lord. Now, I've never thought about the principle of him being sort of a modern day Joseph, but I think that's absolutely possible. The Lord sent Joseph to Egypt to deliver Israel. And I'm not so sure that Mike Johnson hasn't been sent to the House to deliver from some of this nonsense and really the path that our country is going down. Shaun, I don't know about you. I trust Mike Johnson. From what I know so far, I trust him. What about you?
Well, I've looked at his resume. I mean, not actually the list, but I've seen the bio, and I was blown away before I even got to 20%. So the man has got the goods. And to me, I see him as Joseph because there is a famine in the land. It is a famine of leadership.
Mm.
There are so many leaders that need, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record. There are so many leaders that need to be taken to the woodshed. And I'm talking about Republicans, okay, that need to be taken to the woodshed. The Democrat Party, that is a whole nother podcast.
It is, Shaun,
we need to take care of our own.
It is, but we've talked about this in the past. We've talked about party over principle, politics over principle. This really reeks of that. The one things that the Democrats are really good at, besides the obvious like hypocrisy and some of those other things, the one thing that they really are good at is they have fully embraced the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And their enemy is the Republican. And they unite. It doesn't matter how much infighting they have within their party. They unite when it comes against it comes to their opposition of Republicans. And Republicans, we eat our own. It's like we don't understand. So I thought it would be appropriate if we just pulled in. So we're talking about a political reality, but I thought we would bring in a spiritual truth. And we can find that in Matthew 12. So Jesus is talking to these Pharisees, and he just healed a man. And of course, the people are astonished every time Jesus heals someone. I can't believe this happened. And the Pharisees, they said to themselves, "It is only by Beelzebub, the prince of demons, that this fellow drives out demons." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense." Well, Jesus says, of course, first of all, it says he knew their thoughts. And then he says this, "Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? If I drive out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your people drive them out?" And he kind of goes on and he talks about this, that, that this is just not a successful thought process. It doesn't work that way. Kingdoms that have inner turmoil, they're divided against themselves, they're not going to last. They're not sustainable, and they absolutely are not going to accomplish what the ultimate desire is. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. I mean, we've reached a point many times where the Democrats could beat the Republicans with a pair of twos.
But the Republicans are convinced that they have a full house. Sorry, little pun there. I just had to throw in.
It's been decades since I played poker, so
Nice.
but yeah, full house is pretty good.
Well, I think Jesus is clear that, and of course that has wide-reaching implications, right? But I think he's clear about this whole spiritual principle of division. And we've talked about division in our ranks. That was one of the podcasts we've done. We've talked about politics over principle, and I think we're all seeing this kind of coming to a head. I mean, this spiritual principle is playing out in our political reality. And so as I thought about that, I know I was sharing with you at the beginning of the show, or actually right before we got on the show, when we think about another scripture where the Bible says that the devil is like a roaring lion going to and fro, seeking whom he might devour, I'm reminded of what I've seen on the shows where you see lions, because lions always attack whenever they attack like a wildebeest, or they attack in a herd, or any kind of African cow, those animals that they hunt. They always go after the weak, the injured, the old, or the young. And the very first thing you do, they just don't attack it. They charge actually some of the healthy animals and kind of move the herd, and then they seek to get themselves in between to isolate that animal. And then you'll see the mom or the non-injured animals. They'll try to get the animal in their herd back in. They'll try to do that. But ultimately, the lions will persist and persist and persist, and ultimately they will be successful in isolating that animal. And then when that happens, the lions surround the animal, they attack it. And this reminds me, even though I think about that and how it relates to sin and how it relates to guilt and shame and all those things that the enemy uses, it's very applicable here, because when you start taking conservative Judeo-Christian biblically held values and you start carving them up into factions that are competing with each other on one portion of those, what you've done is you've created division, you've created disunity, and you've made it much easier for the enemy to pick apart the very good and great things that we're trying to do. That was kind of what was on my heart when we were just discussing this a little bit earlier, Shaun.
Yeah, it's a crying, rotten, pitiful shame, but it's true. And anytime somebody tries to stand up for righteousness, they get assaulted by all kinds of tweets and emails and people getting online attempting to cancel that person because they stood up. They're called every name in the book, all of them wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. We've got, a form of social terrorism that rises up immediately and comes against anybody who stands up to speak the truth. And when it comes to Washington, we're not helping ourselves as long as we are divided, because like it makes us the easy kill. And as you've been talking about relating to the lions, it makes us easy prey.
So, Shaun, we often, will identify a political challenge. What if you could just see an audience of 100,000 members in front of us right now, listening to you and I debate and talk and bring this issue to light? What would be your call to action to them?
I think my call to action would be to research who these people are. You can go to pewresearch.org, and you can get a list of what's referred to as the Freedom Caucus and their allies. It looks like there's a list of about 47. And honestly, get their phone numbers and call. Be kind, but be firm, and tell them that it is time to stop the nonsense, stop threatening the Speaker of the House to vacate him every time we don't get our way. We must come together and tell them where you're from. Usually when you make calls to these folks, you have to tell them where you're from, but tell them, hey, I'm calling from this other state because I care about America. I also care about you, and you need to understand that I do, as Chris said, agree with you in principle, but this tactic is going to stop. You
Mm,
need to get with Mike and you need to support him so that we can strategically get out of this mess.
I totally agree. I think that we we want to flood with phones and emails and that kind of thing as well, as best we can. So one of the things that you can't, I find it difficult, and I'm if we can find it prior to the publishing of this podcast, we'll put it up on the screen. I'm trying to find his email, Bob Goods, the chair of the Freedom Caucus. The challenge with that is a lot of these government entities now don't actually give out the email. You have to submit through a form, and then they check and see your address. And if you're not in their district, then it'll reject and say you can't send to them. But we're going to see if we can find a campaign email or a house email, some way, or a phone number that we can put on the screen right here, so that you can take that next step and actually contact and express your displeasure and the call to action, which is get behind Mike Johnson, submit to your leader, and let's get this done.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's the simplest way. We have to let our voice be heard. They are elected officials. They are elected to listen to us and represent us. Oh, yeah. And by the way, America is not a democracy. Shocking. We are a constitutional republic, which means those leaders represent us. They need to listen to us. They need to take our counsel before they go in and place their vote for us.
Absolutely. Well, Shaun, I appreciate you taking the time today to just highlight and discuss this issue with me. It certainly was on the top of my list as I saw it come across the news wire today. That, man, we got to talk about this. This division in our ranks is we got to be done with this. This is not accomplishing anything.
It's time to pull together. It's time for unity.
Absolutely. Shaun, till next time.
Till next time.
We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to The Grid. As Chris and Shaun discussed in this episode, you can let your voice be heard by contacting members of the House Freedom Caucus and urge your Republican leadership to unite behind Mike Johnson. The chairman of the Freedom Caucus is Bob Good. You can call his D.C. office by dialing 202-225-4711. That's 202-225-4711. To reach out to other caucus members, you may call the congressional switchboard at 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121. By email, use the address statefreedomcaucus.org/contact/. Be sure to fill out the brief form and submit your brief message. Contact information for both Chairman Bob Good and the State Freedom Caucus Network will be included in the show notes. Thanks for joining us in this call to action. It's past time for Republicans to unite.
Just a quick shout out and thank you again to our sponsor, Midwest Glass and Mirror. Don't forget to go to kingdompatriot.us to join the movement for faith and freedom. Make sure that you give us a 5-star rating on this show, because that is how we spread and broaden our audience. If you're just watching us, you can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, pretty much any other podcast platform. Follow us, subscribe, give us a 5 stars, do everything you can to help us spread the word. And if you're only listening today, our primary mode of distribution now is actually on video.
We sure would love it if you'd share us with friends and family.
And as always, your membership is appreciated, your input is valued, and your voice is definitely needed.